Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and we would like to welcome each of you to the workshop addressing affordable housing issues. This time I will relinquish this portion of the meeting to Mr. Morris, Jim Morris, Deputy City Manager, Daytona Beach.
Mayor and Commission, I'm Jim Morris, Deputy City Manager. This is your workshop on affordable housing. We've got a number of speakers from staff to address various subjects to you. You probably all know from Mr. Fieger's prior announcement, he's out of town at a conference today. And in respect to follow up on this meeting, Mr. Fieger's intention is to schedule a meeting with you subsequent to this, which is intended to be a primer of issues as well as subject matter that you can adopt to address affordable housing issues and bring that back to the Commission for further discussion and direction from the Commission to staff to speak to particular issues or perhaps not speak to particular issues, but give us additional guidance. Once you've had a chance to consider what's being shown to you tonight in a PowerPoint, and certainly we can have printed copies of that available for you to look at as you go along, either later after this evening if you wish to have that. So we're going to start with Mr. Thomas, the redevelopment planner. He and his staff have been impressive and important in getting prepared with the information, particularly numerical content regarding existing affordable housing, some of which is pretty easily identifiable. Others which are not identifiable simply because they're market-driven and there's improvements and so on that have been done to houses. With that, I'll introduce Mr. Ken Thomas, Redevelopment Director for the City of Daytona Beach.
Thank you, Jim. As Jim said, I'm Ken Thomas, Redevelopment Director and Neighborhood Services, City of Daytona Beach, Mayor, City Commissioner. I want to talk to you all today about how did we get here. So, over the years, America has been struggling to find a pathway to address affordable housing for all. Housing is at the forefront of public policy at all levels of government, federal, state, and local. A few decades ago, as a renter, if you were looking to rent an apartment, your financial requirements that you would pay the first month rent and possibly a deposit. Now you're required to pay first month rent, last month rent, and or a deposit, meet a certain credit score, pay a holding fee or an application fee, and you must earn at least 3 times the monthly rent. In 2000, as you know, the mortgage interest rate was around 8%, which was considered high during that time. However, in 2003, the rent went down to 6%, where it averaged the same during the early 2000s. But in 2009, it dropped to 4.81%. As you know, that rate was influenced by the housing industry boom and economic conditions. Because of the attractive mortgage rate, single-family housing construction experienced high volume growth during the early 2000s to 2015. So during that time, single-family homes were at a boom, while multifamily growth remained sort of average. Just 5 years later, here we have COVID-19 pandemic hits America. Rents have risen most than twice as quickly as they were before the pandemic, especially in the state of Florida, in the major areas. What happened? Unlike single-family construction, there was no boom in multifamily construction to accommodate the demand. So we had a lack of supply with multifamily housing that drove up the prices. Now, most of us knew before the pandemic that the need to address affordable housing and attainable housing was something that we needed to address, but when? So here we are today with the recent completed linkage study commissioned by our elected body and members of our community who are requesting that we address affordable and workforce housing. So today, staff is here to provide the following. How much does it really cost to live in Daytona? And who can afford a single-family home in Daytona? How much does it cost to live in Florida? The fair market rent in Florida right now for a 2-bedroom is $1,591. Now, in order to afford rent for $1,591, your income needs to be $5,300 a month. That's what you need to earn. That's essentially about $63,000 annually. In order to afford a 2-bedroom, about $1,600 a month for rent. So what are the rental rates and how much do you need to rent an affordable unit in Daytona? So that's what staff is going to talk to you about today. What steps have we as a city have taken to assist residents to rent or purchase a home in Daytona Beach? What steps we have taken to assist private development to increase the supply of quality, affordable housing in our city? We're also going to talk about how does a linkage fee fit in this process? Will this tool assist in increasing affordable housing in Daytona Beach? What are the steps we need to take to get there with this linkage fee if that is your choice to implement it? And lastly, staff will provide some recommendation of initiatives that we believe will assist our community in providing more inventory of attainable housing for our community. And so the next staff person coming up would be Ms. Yolanda Presley.
Good afternoon, good evening, Mayor, Commission. I'm here just to talk about just some of the numbers as it relates to affordable housing or housing in Daytona Beach. I think what we need to start with is understanding what affordable means as it relates to HUD. HUD defines affordable as a consumer consuming no more than 30% of a household's income as it relates to housing. In February 2024, the median sale price for homes in Daytona was $298,000. If we look at, go back to 2022, which was the last, as far as the stats I was able to get as far as median household income, we were looking at $47,608 as far as a household of 4. So we're looking at a median sale price of $298,000, median household income of around $47,608 of a household of 4. When we break this down and start looking at numbers, let's look at really what affordable actually means. If we look at gross income, gross monthly income, if we take that same $47,608 and we break that down, divide that by 12, we get $3,967. So our housing expense should be 30% of that, based on HUD's definition. If we take 30% of $3,967, we're going to get $1,190. $1,190. So let's break this down a little bit more. So when we say affordable housing, affordable being 30% of your household income or less based on HUD's definition, let's look at affordability. We have a home, just say a home, $135,000. We're probably sitting here now like, okay, $135,000. Where are you going to find a home for $135,000? I know that's what y'all are thinking. Well, that's what the people in Daytona Beach are asking as well. Where are we going to find a home for $135,000? But let's just use this number just for the sake of this demonstration. $135,000 asking price, sales price. If someone is doing FHA at 3.5%, and on an average, let's just say our interest rate is 7%. When I looked at bankrate.com, 30-year fixed right about now as of today was like 6.97, but we're going to use 7%. On a 30-year fixed, principal, interest, taxes, and insurances, plus PMI, you're looking at $1,177.59. That's if we're staying at the 135, 3.5%, 7% interest rate. $1,177.59. Now, if our housing expense is only supposed to be 30%, and I break this down, and that's supposed to be $1,190. even at $135,000, even at $135,000, which we're not going to find a house in the city of Daytona for $135,000, unless it's a fix and flip or something you got to put a whole lot of money in to get it up to par, you're not going to find that. So the question here is, what is affordable? Can we say that a median household income, and these are stats, this is not something that I made up. If a family, a household of four is making $47,608 a year, and at $135,000, their payment is going to be $1,177 because HUD is saying we need to stay at that 30%. Now, we understand that depending on who they're getting approved through, there's different programs, there are different mortgage companies that may go 35, 40, 45% DTI. We understand that, but let's look at this as an average and on a normal basis, because here at the City of Daytona, with the programs that we operate from, with our SHIP program, our home funds, the funds that we use for down payment assistance, we're going along with HUD. We have to, abide by HUD guidelines. So, although we do have clients that once they're approved, the lender is gonna maybe 35, 40, some even 45% DTI. But still, let's look at those numbers and think about what are we talking about as it relates to affordability. So when we look at DPA, on an average, extremely low to very low, the city usually gives about $50,000 for extremely low, very low, $40,000 for low income, $30,000 for moderate. So this is down payment assistance to go along with purchasing a home to help them buy down that purchase price. So now let's look at affordable based on HUD's definition again, without DPA. $180,000. You think we can find one for $180,000? No? Y'all looking at me like, no, that ain't gonna work. So $180,000 won't work. $180,000, $40,000 DPA, 7% interest rate, 30-year fix, principal, interest, taxes and insurance, and PMI, you're looking at $1,196. That's on $180,000. $1,196 a month. If we're trying to stay within the HUD guideline at 30% of your household income. So now let's break this down. Let's look at fair market rates a little bit as it relates to rent. Efficiency. HUD fair market rate, $958. 1 bedroom, $1,152. 2 bedroom, $1,413. 3 bedroom, $1,865. But on an average in Daytona, looking at market, efficiency, $1,150. 1 bedroom, $1,494. 2 bedroom, $1,872. 3 bedroom, $2,251. So we're looking at HUD fair market rate versus average rent in the city of Daytona. And if we just take the zip code 32114 for instance, the average rent in that zip code, $1,423. And that's just rent alone. So when we talk about affordable housing, I think it's important for us to take a step back and start looking at really what affordable means, because we can come up with different names: affordable, attainable, workforce housing. At the end of the day, the bottom line is, can somebody afford to live? It doesn't matter what title you give it. Can you afford to live? Can you afford to work in the city of Daytona, purchase you a home for you and your family, or just rent a nice apartment for you and your family to raise your children? That's just bottom line. So once we really take the scales off and start looking at what we mean by affordable, then we'll be able to address some of these other issues and bring some things to the table to be able to help developers to come and want to build in the city of Daytona, and being able to bring some incentives to the table to help that happen. But until that happens, right now, we're looking at $47,608 a year for a household of four for average median income. And so you tell me, is that affordable?
You can go on to the next page. Thank you, Yolanda. When we were meeting prior to coming here tonight, Yolanda went through a shorter version of what she just told you. But she speaks, I think, very clearly and identifies issues that are helpful for everybody to see in a stark way that, in fact, that is the existence that we have today. I know the commission has thought about things that you've done to date or things the city has done to date to try and assist affordable housing. And in fact, you've done quite a bit. And we've enumerated those things in broad form here. And so we started with allowance of waiver of fees and permits to allow affordable housing to be created. You got SHIP programs that Mr. Thomas and his office work through, and they can answer additional questions if you'd like to talk about that. In respect to land use regulations, and we've worked to establish duplex and single-family homes as principal uses where they weren't previously in the zoning that we currently have. And there's other places where we're looking to increase that so that you get additional yield from existing properties, which in a sense would drop your unit cost by allowing more than one unit over the same size piece of property, which will be helpful in some instances in some neighborhoods. And we've had requests from citizens to do that in certain areas of the city with properties that they own in those areas, and we're working on that. In respect to duplexes and so on, and we've got incentives that have been provided for development of 62 units in the community redevelopment area, but you also had, and Mayor, this is a program that you worked on with Mark Watts, the waiver of taxes that pertain to Atlantic housing, and that resulted in roughly 523 affordable units being created within the last 2 years or so as a result of the city taking the position of allowing a waiver of fees. That program is also audited using the programs that the state uses to make sure that in fact affordable units are being provided. That opportunity will exist again as developers come forward to pursue that same course of conduct, but that was one that really you led the way and Mark Watts brought it to you, and I thought you were instrumental in bringing that forward. And ultimately it made sense. There was some difficulty at first in understanding how it might, but in fact it does, and doing it again would be a good thing to do. We've got direct assistance in the form of tax waivers developed for affordable housing projects, support private sector affordable housing, and there's a number of ways that the city's been working to do that. The city has a fair number of vacant properties that have come to it through tax defaults, and in the county practice, when tax properties are up for taxes and they are not purchased on the market, the county will actually convey those properties that are within the city limits to the city of Daytona Beach. That's the same way we came by the 32 acres out on LPGA for the park that's also under creation. So the city's been selling those lots to people that promise and in fact covenant to build affordable units on those properties. And that's been an ongoing program that's picked up some speed. And collectively with that, you've also had participation from Mr. Thomas's group in working through grants for different things to both accommodate new construction as well as improve existing housing for existing residents where the housing could be made more sound. And in a sense, it's affordable in that the people are there. On the other hand, it probably isn't the quality of housing that they would like to have or that you would like to see. So we have programs to help that, which is something that's a little hard to count because it's existing with existing occupants, but still it makes a difference in the neighborhood. You got a project about to come to you with a set aside for affordable housing in the rezoning project. And that's there on the old Baptist church site that you've seen. And I know that that project's coming through. The applicants were just here this week, talked about that. We had a discussion during the staff meeting with the applicant about the commission's position in respect to affordable housing. And they didn't have to be made to do it. They actually said they'd already figured out they would have a set aside of 10% of the units within their project to be affordable housing, I think, in the form of workforce housing for downtown development. You've also supported, to some degree of success, grant applications to the Florida Housing Finance Corporation, which has been when you've seen a developer come forward and say to you, I want to build this project in this location, this is what it's for, but I need a commitment from you, Commission, to show buy-in from the city to support that. You have done that. That's the lottery system that the state uses. I don't think we've been successful in having a lottery winner within our city limits. But in terms of buying the chance to have someone have the opportunity, you have done that as a commission. We're going to come to future proposals and things that you can do in a few minutes. You've also talked a fair amount as a commission about the existing supply of affordable housing. And there's places where numbers are certain and places where I think they're a little bit vaguer, but this is the housing that's provided by the Daytona Beach Housing Authority, which coincidentally covers more than the corporate limits of Daytona Beach. They are basically line to line in the county on the north-south axis east of 95 that they provide assistance. But within Daytona Beach, these numbers reflect the activity of the Housing Authority. So you got 1,645 rent vouchers from the Housing Authority, 479 housing units, for a total of 2124 households that are assisted. You've got a comparative group of numbers down below which deals with, the land is not east of 95, but it shows the count from the land that we have been able to obtain, as well as Ormond and New Smyrna. And Holly Hill is lumped in there in broader numbers, but you can see that Daytona Beach has a very large supply compared to other communities on the eastern side of the county of affordable housing units. But we've noted down below in the footnote, the second one, in addition to units provided by or supported by the Housing Authority, the city has various programs to support affordable housing, and some of those I just mentioned as it related to first-time home buyers, which has been a successful and important program in the city to get people into housing. And you've also had a fair amount of rent support from the Housing Authority as well as actions from the city, which help people to get into households and have quality housing that they can thrive in and look for different opportunity as things come forward. A big topic that you have been interested in is the linkage fee and creating that, and certainly we've got the basis of the study that shows that a linkage can be created. The science of creating the actual charges is something that Mr. Gross will speak to in his comments in respect to the requirements for a linkage fee. And I know that there is a statute that says it pretty plainly that we can create one, but I think the statute itself has to be read in the backdrop of other law in Florida, but I don't want to get over into Mr. Gross's topical matter. So in respect to that, what I'd like to do, if you would, Ben, if you would take over now and speak to the commission about the linkage fees. And Mayor, I'll come back to the things in terms of what can be done to increase the supply of affordable housing after Mr. Gross's comments are complete.
Jim, I discussed this with the commissioners at some length at last Wednesday's City Commission meeting. A linkage fee, well, it's not really defined in the statute, but the simplest definition of a linkage fee is a fee paid as a condition of approving development that would be used to help promote affordable housing. There is a statute, 166.04151, which specifically allows local governments to impose linkage fees. Frankly, local governments had home rule authority to impose linkage fees before that statute was created. That statute's been amended over the years. And due to somewhat recent amendments, the statute now provides that as a condition for imposing a linkage fee on any residential or mixed-use residential project, a local government has to fully offset the developer's costs of providing those affordable housing units. And the statute doesn't specify how we do that. It gives several illustrations, such as providing density bonuses, impact fee waivers. There's really no limit to the way that we could incentivize it, but the statute's very clear that we have to fully offset the cost to those developers, that is residential and mixed-use residential developers. One logical problem that you might run into in trying to fully incentivize those costs is your biggest leverage is probably through the provision of density bonuses. And in order to give a density bonus, it begs the question, what are the normal density limits? And it was an intentional purpose in the rewrite of the Land Development Code in 2012, my understanding is, that we make the Land Development Code much more user-friendly and easy to use in terms of encouraging development, because as you know, we had lost population or remained stagnant for a period of 20 or 30 years while surrounding communities like Ormond Beach and Port Orange grew. So the planners can tell you more about this, but our Land Development Code is currently very generous with regard to density limits. So I can't tell you what the math would be to work out how to fully offset a developer's cost. I can tell you that that cost is obviously going to be different for a developer who's providing for affordable housing for very low income people, families, as opposed to workforce or moderate income families. Very low income, I think, is defined as having an income that's equal to 60% of the adjusted gross income for family size in the area. Workforce or moderate is typically defined as 120%. So clearly, the bigger the difference between what the developer could expect to recoup and what they would be limited to recouping based on the type of affordable housing, the more the city would have to make up. So that's a limitation in the statute. But as I discussed with you, that's only one limitation. And there's also constitutional as well as organic limitations under state law that come into play and came into play before the state statute was created. So first off, under the Constitution, an exaction is a condition of development imposed by a local government on a developer. It's any condition. And the question becomes, at what point is an exaction so intrusive and so costly to the developer that under the Constitution it constitutes a taking? Now, a taking originally was where government literally took and occupied your land. Can't do that. The Constitution prohibits it. Prohibits the taking of property actually without compensation. We can take property, but we have to pay property owners for it. Over the years, the courts have expanded the jurisprudence relating to takings and regulations that are tantamount to fully occupying a property or preventing a property from being developed. In other words, exactions, which have those kinds of consequences, those can also constitute takings. So there's a whole body of law that's built up around regulations that go too far. And under two cases in particular, which we outlined, Mr. Jagger, the former city attorney, and I, back in 2020, when the commission was looking at this issue. Two cases, the first case is Nolan, the second case is Dolan, where the court has imposed tests to determine whether an exaction is legitimate. And these tests would apply to us regardless of what the state statute does. And under Nolan, the question is, I'm sorry, I've got to turn to the page where I wrote my notes, there's got to be a nexus or a connection between what the government wants the landowner to do and a legitimate state interest. I don't think there's any question that there's a legitimate state interest in encouraging affordable housing. And if there was any room for doubt, the state statute takes care of that, although, as I said, I think we already had home rule authority to require affordable housing anyway. The Dolan case says that the imposition must be related both in nature and extent to the impact of the proposed development. So if a developer was going to encroach on the wetlands, it wouldn't be appropriate to charge a higher fee to pave roadways, which is unrelated to wetlands. It might be suitable to charge a fee for destroying the wetlands. Those are related. So it's not just the logical connection between them, but the extent. And what that means is you can't require the developer to pay for a lack of something that pre-existed that development. You can require the developer to pay for the negative impacts of that development on whatever it is you're trying to protect or promote or encourage. That's the federal Supreme Court law represented by two cases regarding exactions. We also have in Florida limitations on our own power, including home rule power. One of those limitations is we only have a limited power to tax. And that power is given to us specifically by the legislature. We only get the powers they give us. It's not like home rule power where we can arguably have incidental related power to implement. It's what the legislature strictly gives us. And as you know, what the legislature mainly gives us is the power to impose ad valorem taxes up to 10 mils, local business taxes, and there's a few miscellaneous taxes in addition to that. When courts look at municipal imposition of fees of any kind on anybody, whether they're permit application fees, user fees, like using the rec center, or what you might have heard of as being called impact fees. All of those fees, there are judicial tests where the courts look at those fees to make sure they're legitimate as opposed to being unlawful taxes. Now, what I spent a lot of my time talking with you about at the last meeting is that while the law is not completely clear on this particular issue, it appears to me, and I think the better reading of the law, is that in order for us to impose linkage fees, we would have to meet the judicial test in Florida for impact fees, which is very similar, by the way, to the U.S. Supreme Court cases that I just read to you about regarding exactions. The dual rational nexus test requires first that the fee is connected to or has a nexus with the need for the infrastructure or the service, infrastructure like roads or utilities, services like police and fire, that there has to be a connection or a nexus between the infrastructure that's needed to serve that new development, the increased demand on that infrastructure or service created by that new development. There has to be that relationship between the fee and that development. And then the second part of the test is you then actually have to use the fee to expand that service or infrastructure. So the tests are somewhat similar, but the takeaways under both the constitutional cases that apply to exactions in general and the state limitations on impact fees are, first, you can't impose a fee to require a developer to cover up a gap in whatever it is in terms of infrastructure or service that you already have. That would be unfair, maybe unconstitutional, or at least an unlawful exaction under constitutional law, and it would not pass the impact fee test under Florida law, such that a court might say, hey, this is not a valid fee, it's a tax. Yes?
So it seems like it's allocated to that particular area, number one. So if you were to do a linkage fee, you would have to restrict it to that area. The fees would be used in that particular area versus wherever you choose to use it.
I think, let's take roads, for example. We could collect an impact fee related to a development on the west side and spend it on a city road on the east side, as long as the fee is being used to expand the roadway system. The limitation is on using it to expand the system. Now, there's a different fee that you're probably thinking about, prop share, which is a separate kind of fee that state law allows, where you look at the immediate impacts of a development in the surrounding area on traffic. There's some argument that you might have to use, that the county might have to use the prop share fees in that area. But we're talking about apples and oranges. The key restriction is that when I collect that impact fee on the west side of town, it's got to be for what's called an impact fee generating development. If somebody builds a new house in place of an existing house, that's not impact fee generating development. There was already a house there. And either A, that house paid an impact fee, or B, that house was already in existence when we first created impact fees and took a snapshot of our roadway system and saw that we had our existing deficits. Those were baked into the system, right? So the limitation here, and I think the significant one, is in order to generate a linkage fee, and this would have to be the next part of a study that had already been commenced, whether you use the same consultant or a different consultant, somebody should relate the amount of the fee to some kind of logical assessment of the type of development on the service. Presumably, for example, a residential development wouldn't create the same need for additional affordable housing in the city as a commercial development, because in a commercial development, that means you've got to hire workers to staff that development, maybe more so with a factory than with a retail store, right? And it would be the job of the study, and this is what's done with impact fee studies all the time, is to describe different uses and associate the impact that they have on those uses. It can be done. Now, one good news here, if you want to call it good news, is because the state statute also requires us to fully compensate residential and mixed-use residential developers for their cost of providing the impact fee, I don't think that any of this is relevant to them. It's only relevant to the commercial development side. One other caveat, the state statute, bare on its face, according to some people, waives the requirement for an impact fee because it just gives us out-and-out clear authority to establish linkage fees. As I told you in the last meeting, I don't think that's how the courts are going to come out, because the limitations we're talking about are not just limitations on our authority under state law, they're limitations under the Constitution regarding exactions and takings. One thing I do want to mention, because I think there was a report of some of our discussion from last week in the newspaper. The newspaper quoted me as saying that if we imposed a linkage fee and didn't do it in the correct way, the court would determine that it's an unlawful tax and that we'd have to pay back that fee in full. It's not clear whether we would actually have to pay back all of the fees collected. There are cases on that. It depends on how bad the facts were. In this case, if we were doing it under the color of a statute, which may appear to give us authority to not comply with the linkage fees, I don't think that the risk is quite as high that if somebody waited for a lawsuit for 7 or 8 years after we imposed a linkage fee without doing the legwork, that a court would say, give all the money back. I don't think that would happen. But the other thing I want to tell you is back in 2020, when we were considering doing some stuff with, some limited stuff with planned developments, for example, we had several threat to sue letters from attorneys. I don't think it would be 7 or 8 years before we saw that lawsuit, particularly if the fee that we came up with was exorbitant. You know, the development community is pretty well financed. They've lobbied the state for things like the proportionate fair share rule, which took the place of what we used to have in the ability to deny development because of impact on traffic. So you might anticipate a lawsuit if A, we didn't do the legwork, and B, our fee was something that they felt was too high. Does it mean we can't do it or shouldn't do it? No. I mean, if the city commission elected to pursue a linkage fee, it would be our office's job to defend that fee vigorously. Are there any questions on the legal part of this? Yes.
Legally, who decides how the linkage fees are spent?
Well, we would decide that, but the
commission?
rules are if we're going to impose a linkage fee, say for police services or parks, we have to use those fees for police services or parks. But we would have a lot of discretion on how to grow the pool of affordable housing if we imposed an affordable housing linkage fee.
Is there a range right now from your research on what is the minimum, mid-range, maximum before the law is triggered, before people go, oh, that's just too much or too little, or?
I think I mentioned to you that I'd done some anecdotal research, and I'm talking, I think it was 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. It wasn't recent. And I did see some references to fees of $1 or $2 mm-hmm. per square foot. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you that would be reasonable or wouldn't be reasonable.
I recall that.
I think the better thing to do is if you're concerned about the development community suing you, and look, I mean, if they sue us, we defend it. You work with them. In many communities, there have often been sort of community workforce groups getting together and figuring all this stuff out. You're not obligated to do it. If a consultant gives you a study that assigns the cost of a linkage fee based on the impact of a certain kind of development, if it's structurally sound, then that linkage fee is valid and it's defensible.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Question. You said we have to make the developer whole for whatever they spend, whatever
We have to fully offset their costs of creating those affordable
Okay.
housing units.
Would it be possible, if we had the appetite for it, to establish an amount of money per square foot, depending on the type of development, to go into the affordable housing fund and just not have to do all this other stuff with compensating the developer and keeping up with all of that, just so much per square foot, depending on the type of development that it is. And everything we approve, that's how much we have to put into the affordable housing fund, rather than getting all complicated and we allow them to do this and we ask them to do this, and then we end up having to give the taxpayers money back to them anyway in some form or fashion.
I mean, I think what you're really asking is if you made the fee nominal enough that the developers aren't going to object, then they don't object. I can't tell you how nominal that would have to be.
We would still have to make them whole, though, of what you said.
Yeah, see,
So why not just leave that out and us decide as a city, once we approve that, that's how much money we put into the affordable housing fund?
I may have
rather than getting into the back and forth with the developers.
I may have misunderstood the scenario. I thought what you were saying is just decide to come up with a flat fee, maybe based on the number of square feet of
Not from the
development.
developer, from the city.
From the city.
To
Oh,
pay
yeah,
on
sure.
development we approve.
Yes, yeah. If the city just, we're only talking about situations where we require a developer to pay a surcharge in addition to permit costs and impact fee costs. That surcharge is then used to fund a trust fund. If we're just stroking a check ourselves, if we're getting people to pay that voluntarily, if it's not a requirement, then we're not in any part related to what I've been talking about for the last 10 minutes.
So we could just do away with that if we decided to, as the governing body of the city here. If we decided to put a certain amount of money, taxpayer money, which we're either going to have to give it back to the developer anyway, according to what you just said, we have to make them whole. If we just went ahead and made the decision that, okay, we're going to do a 100,000 square foot warehouse, then the city's going to kick in $25,000-$50,000 to the affordable housing fund.
Sure, but it also doesn't have to be either or. Right now, as you know, we adopted Section 6.22 of the Land Development Code I think in the last 4 years, and it was something that had inadvertently dropped out of the Clarion rewrite. It provides for a range of administratively approved incentives for affordable housing that are kind of automatic as long as somebody going through the permitting process is willing to commit to building affordable housing units. They include impact fee waivers, they include permit fee waivers, and those are already being given, and they can already be counted toward the cost of offsetting the developer's cost. I just can't give you the math right here and tell you what that's worth in terms of the developer's cost. We're already doing some of it, is what I'm saying.
Being whole does not mean writing a check. But you are suggesting that in lieu of having to make them whole, you say a new development comes to town and they're gonna give you, in the first year, a certain amount of money in property taxes. You say you just take it, say we're gonna take a percentage of that and put it into a trust fund. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
No, I understand that.
Well, and the city's
It's not
always.
what I want to do.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Preferably, but I understand it. Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You're talking about taking our tax money and deciding how you want to use it. That's what you all do every day, so.
Yeah.
6 of one, half a dozen the other.
But I understand, there's a lot of litigious legal dialogue because this is our attorney and he has an obligation to defend us and give us good advice that keeps us out of trouble. But I haven't known you to really be afraid of developers in this way. But I have known you not to want to be sued.
Right.
So I respect that sentiment. I don't think any of us wants to be sued. But the precedence on being sued for creating a trust, what does that exist in Florida at this
No,
time?
I mean, not to my knowledge. Creating a trust and just establishing a special fund to be used for affordable housing begs the question, where the source of the funds comes from. There's nothing unlawful about that.
Something just pops to mind. It's like, has Daytona Beach sometimes been on the radar for being sued when we try to do some things? Are we sometimes at the center of being sued for multiple things?
My sense from being here as long as I've been is that we do get sued more than other cities of a similar size because of the name cachet
And we're trying
value
new
of
things.
Daytona Beach.
We're trying some other strategies, which leaves us open.
Yeah.
Do we have a number of how much we want to have in the trust fund? Or is it just a trust fund? Is there a number that would, so for example, how much X millions of dollars gives us this many vouchers, gives us this much rent? Like, how are you looking to, because that might influence how much money is needed. So is it because we're adding to SHIP funds, down deposit funds? Are we looking to offset rent? What are we looking to accomplish with it? Because that might make a difference in how much we're looking at.
Aaron, in respect to the hour, and the question, if I might pick up, I'll try to bring this to a conclusion because we're going to have more time to talk. In respect to the millions or whatever, the number isn't established, but there are multiple tools for us to pursue. And Mayor, as you've assessed, the make them whole idea is to a certain extent a barter approach in respect to what makes them whole in an in-kind way, not in a dollars and cents way.
Exactly.
And that's an important point to keep in mind as we consider what makes someone whole. As it relates to the money that's generated, there's multiple sources that can create funds, and some of them you've heard about, which we're already using. And I'm going to start, actually, Ken, with the other pages, teardrop page, if you will. There's 3 items on this page that really kind of go together. One is creation of a linkage fee ordinance, which would generate funds of some sort. The amount is not intended to be predicted, but there needs to be a recipient for that. So as those funds come in, the intention would be to start a 501c3, which is basically a tax-free entity in the name of the city of Daytona Beach, to receive the money, dedicating the money to affordable housing. And from the perspective of the Housing Trust Fund, to hold those contributions for expenditure as the commission elects to undertake. The manager has talked about in your next budget, you will probably see a proposal to appropriate $250,000 of general funds to put into a fund that would be held by the trust, if that was the choice of the commission, to begin the seed money basically for working on just a straight cash affordable housing proposal, somewhat mirroring Mr. Ken's comments in respect to funding something, not related to development, but just related to starting to address the issue and figure out a way to go about that. It brings me then to the purple teardrop, which relates to PDs, and you'll see a slight mention of that at the bottom. But we presently have no density or intensity limits in our PD ordinance. And when zoning exceeds the limits allowed by the zoning ordinance, you actually have an increase to the yield given to developers. We have the opportunity to present to you amendments to the zoning ordinance which limit PDs to a certain number of intensity or density units that's probably relatively low compared to what you've ordinarily seen. Those bonus units become something that need to be compensated for by the developer as they seek additional units, and let that be in the form of contributions towards affordable housing. We presently have a community benefit approach, which is really hard to identify what is significant in that respect, but as it relates to affordable housing and contribution, there are tools probably to come to an approach that deals with that based on increases in density, increases in intensity in the event of non-residential style development. The next suggestion is sale of city-owned. Sir?
Wait. I think that's important, and I am in favor of that.
We've already started work.
Okay, you've already started the work.
Yes, sir.
Because I want to see it before
All right.
us. Go ahead.
The last one, just sales of city-owned surplus property, which we've already spoken about. The last page is really a plan or a set of items to be undertaken to move forward. First would be to create a 5-year plan to identify the various tools and methodologies and priorities of the commission.
Wait,
Yes, ma'am.
Can I stop you and interrupt you? I just have a question. Right now, the county has a 5-year plan going on the Community Land Trust Fund.
Yes.
They put a RFP out and selected a vendor to get the land trust started, and is negotiating the finer terms of this contract, and this began last year. Now, my question is, supposedly there are 3 affordable housing advisory committees: the county, the city of Daytona Beach, and Deltona. These 3 groups met right before Christmas, and they have decided that they were going to elect 2 people from each, the county, the city of Daytona Beach, and Deltona. The county is having their meeting next week to form that meeting. Shouldn't that be something that you guys work out and come back to us to let us know about what is going on with this trust fund that is being set up by the county? Because they want all of us to work together.
If I might, I think it's more significant than just the trust fund, but we've been through other things like WAVE and some other issues where you had Daytona Beach's assets, property, and ability effectively appropriated by other entities that don't have the same. And so you have an issue of how the commission wishes to be involved or not be involved based on how the monies and so on will be spent. So do we need to be involved? Absolutely. It's a broader involvement than you just suggested, because right now trying to assess for you the impact that that has on the city really involves staff that you already have present, the legal staff, and more participation than presently exists. And Mayor nodded affirmatively in a couple minutes in terms of some of those things that we've seen in the past. The Water Authority was something that would have emboweled Daytona Beach.
Yeah, we had.
And you could have other instances. The impact fees that you have from the county are assessed in the city because the county has a provision in its charter that lets them come into city limits. There are buffers in the county charter that have to be enforced by Daytona Beach, whether we agree or not. My point being, I think we need to be careful as to whether or not the sovereign powers of the city that presently aren't taken away by the charter aren't somehow voluntarily surrendered. So the idea may sound great, but to know what the idea really means
Well,
to the
I
city is
haven't
important.
heard much about it. That's what I'm
I
asking.
understand. So
And
the
my
answer to
next
your
que-
question
my-
is yes.
Okay, and my next question is, so our 2023-2024 budget was $332 million. Okay, the revenue from property taxes that the city of Daytona Beach collects is $43.8 million. Okay, so our Daytona Beach, the revenue for the property tax does not even cover our Daytona Beach Police Department budget of $56.1 million. So we depend on a lot of those commercial properties and stuff. And if we're going to be the only city charging linkage fees, do you think they're going to come to Daytona? No, they're going to go to Port Orange. They're going to go to Ormond Beach. Why aren't they doing what we are doing? We are doing more as a city than any other city here. And I'm not done, I'm sorry. And I know we have all these faith groups that I received an email stating that they give to the Barracks of Hope, they give money, and the reason they can't chip in, these churches, because they give money to the Barracks of Hope, they give money to the First Step Shelter, they give money to Hope Place. Well, let me tell you, I think it's Father Phil does give $6,000 a year to the First Step Shelter. But Barracks of Hope and Hope Place, I work very close with them all the time. And I can tell you, I talked to Buck and I talked to Ann, and the faith group actually has not given one dime to these people, maybe as individual, but not as the faith group. So if the city of Daytona Beach is going to start doing, this is my personal opinion, start doing more as for these linkage fees and affordable trust funds, I believe the community should be involved too, because this shouldn't just be the responsibility of Daytona Beach. And that's my personal opinion, and you guys are, do your own opinion.
Okay.
So the discussion tonight isn't to do anything other than consider ideas. And the commission always, always, always sets the policy, not the staff. Our object is to present ideas to you that we have, to implement ideas or take suggestions that you want to see evaluated, and do all those things, but always the final policy decision of any mixture, ordinances, activities is determined by 4 out of 7, whatever it may be. And right now, you don't have the idea of the linkage fee on the dais for a vote. You have consideration of the idea and how it might be created. It's intended, and as I mentioned in the front end, evaluation and consideration of various ideas presented, and you've asked, Mayor, for a toolbox, and we're trying to present as many items as we can tonight to show you that toolbox, is to allow the commission to make those policy choices by the majority vote of the commission on various pieces or on the plan. So this is meant to be a preview, but not an action item tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the question in respect to the plans the county has are important, and we need to act on that. For the balance of it, the manager will be present, you'll have a lot more input, and it'll be much more focused than this evening. This evening is meant to be a broad overview of the consideration of things that we have looked at as much as we can. We've tried to put it into a digestible form. We've got a lot more data and information behind us, but there's formats for that, and it takes a lot more time than we have this evening. So just going on, what I'm going to do, because I know it is well after 6 now.
I do have one more question.
May I just finish?
Okay, if we charge a linkage fee and we have commercial projects going elsewhere, are we going to have to eliminate some of our things that we do now in our facilities and staff and everything? Because I was just telling you, we can even cover with the revenue and taxes, our police department.
You presume I know a lot more, and I'm a lot smarter than I am on either subject. I could
Okay.
not answer the question without careful evaluation from any number of staff people.
I'm just curious, because.
I think those are questions that come to the commission as you decide what to do. And certainly we'll give you the best data we can for any questions or concerns you have prior to public hearing and consideration. And you always also, as a commission, have the opportunity, if you come to a place where an item's on the agenda and you think, I'm not sure I'm ready tonight, give us the additional information and we'll move forward to get it for you so that you don't make a decision until you're ready. The question you just asked is a broad question, and I
understand.
couldn't possibly answer.
And I'm not in objection of doing a trust fund. The problem is, it shouldn't be all the responsibility of the city of Daytona Beach.
I skipped over the trust fund a little bit, but keep in mind, it is not single purpose or single source. It's a pot to hold the money dedicated to affordable housing. It's allocated according to commission decisions. Where the money comes from and how the money is expended are both within the control of the commission. Whether it's an appropriation from the budget, whether it's a charge of a fee, whether it's changing the PDs, you're in control of everything, so you have the ability in a much more focused format to make decisions that suits a majority of you. And you likewise would later have the opportunity that suits the majority of the commission at that time to make changes. And that's really what the object of this is, to try and give as broad a picture as we can. Certainly, we've got a bunch of staff behind us, and everybody will do their part to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Morris, when was the last time our impact fees were updated? You know?
We increased water and sewer fees about a year and a half ago, Andy?
2 years.
2 years? So with water and sewer fees, we're looking at road impact fees sometime in the future. Daytona Beach's road impact fees are very small compared to the county. But the
what
county
about
has
like
a thoroughfare road system.
For our public safety, everything?
Pardon?
When was-
All of the impact
Okay.
fees, other than water and sewer,
Yes.
were created in 2006.
2000?
They were automatically increased by Consumer Price Index
Okay.
up until about 4 or 5 years ago when the state statutes were amended to prohibit that. But they've never been amended due to any kind of formal analysis that looks at whether we're collecting enough. There is a plan, my understanding is from talking with the city manager, for us to go out for a consultant and have somebody study those with a view toward amending them.
I thought we'd given that direction.
Yeah.
We know they need to be updated, and and the manager's taking a hand to start that.
Okay.
Mayor, I think what I may do, the paper's in front of you, you all can read.
No,
No, sir?
this is important.
All right.
Finish. You're
So
just
we're-
giving us ideas. I don't want us to think that a linkage fee is the only way to get a trust fund.
No, sir, it's absolutely not.
It's not.
Just,
So-
it's like a river. A river is
Yeah.
composed of raindrops. It comes from many sources.
Yeah. Okay.
Just looking at the plan, there's no priority in the items that we've got there, but allowed by law, establish maximum density and intensity standards to redefine and create community benefits by approval of PD zoning. And there'll be some numeric impact in that, in the way that we would approach that part of the question. As allowed by law, allow standard zoning, density and intensity bonus units that promote affordable housing. The project that I mentioned, I think, is probably building at about the maximum density they can for the type of construction they have, the location they have, and the available parking. But that's not the only one you're going to see. So in terms of making someone whole, bonus units to accomplish making them whole is one of the ways you compensate for compelling affordable housing improvements. Encourage faith-based institutions to contribute towards affordable housing. We've already seen a little of that debate in the paper and in the comments, but it's something that is a community entity that it's up to the commission to decide how it wishes to address that. Establish commission-approved general fund appropriation. I've mentioned that already. The manager has been discussing that with staff, and I expect that you will see that in a proposed budget. But I expect it, until he does it, I will just say that I expect that you'll see that, and he'll tell you about it. Linkage fees in respect to aiding, providing funding for the Housing Trust Fund, one of the drops of water in the collector that would come along. Again, it's a commission decision. Impact, we could, as a city, pay for affordable housing units, impact fees relating to roads, water, and sewer. The water and sewer impact fees are substantial on a per-unit basis. If the commission decides that it wants to pay that, there's some legal restrictions on simply waiving versus paying from another fund, but that's a possibility. affordable housing co-op to purchase building materials, just simply having the power of buying in scale. And this department does, Ken and I have a common wall. And I can tell you the amount of work that goes on with his staff in respect to home improvement. And that's something where we're not trying to tell you how many existing affordable family-owned units there are in the city. But from the perspective of the people who own the property, they've owned it for generations, but the quality of the housing could use improvement. There are areas where flooding is an issue, and there's things that can be done to help that. I think you have to look at that as a contribution toward affordable housing, and the important part of it in my mind is that it speaks to people that are here, have been here, and are a part of this community, but you could use a hand up that they don't have the ability to do themselves the things they need to make their housing better. But those programs are in action. I think funding them is a commission decision if you wish to fund more of it. There's a reference here to stem wall construction. I'm not sure if you all know what a stem wall is. I'm going to assume that you don't, and I'll explain it briefly. It's the old-fashioned way of building a house in Florida. Before you had monolithic slabs with dirt piles, you built a ditch, you poured concrete, you laid about 4 courses of block, and you had a crawl space under the building, and you elevated the floor. People walked into their house by going up the stairs. What that had the effect of doing, whether it was that style or another style, which was even older, was masonry columns on wooden houses, and those were stringers going across. You elevate the occupied floor area out of the flood basin. And it takes less ground because you only do the area of the house, which is vertical, versus a slab, which comes up with a hill to get up high enough. That has to do with displacing water that would otherwise be flood water. It's an important part of old school construction that worked in Florida for a reason, and it still does. Acquiring vacant lots for single and multifamily home development, we've spoken about that, existing ones, but there also may be opportunities to acquire property and let those be dedicated toward homes within the city that would be affordable. And then access to capital for small development firms where you've got builders in the area that could do the job but perhaps don't have the wherewithal to get the financing that they need to move the work forward. Again, those are things that are risk assessed by the city. And we have many more things we can present to you, but those are the broadest things that we brought to you and things that I know you've been interested in, and hopefully some food for thought as you come toward the next meeting, which the manager will work with you to schedule and have further consideration of the issue. I know linkage fee will be one of the things that's on the top in terms of a study and so on, if that's what we're going to do. And I know, Mayor, you have a different point of view, or a point of view that's important, and maybe some other commission members too. I've heard yours expressed in public, which is how I'm aware of it. Those are all things that will be taken into account as we move forward. I appreciate your time and patience this evening. We had planned to stay within the limits, but it doesn't always work that way.
Jim, can I get a list of how many properties we've given to Mid-Florida Housing and Hope Place?
I'm sure you can.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, thank you very much.
Okay. You asked for a list?
Yes.
Oh, okay, how many we gave to Mid-Florida? Do you have any other questions or comments from the commission?
So the last 3, the last 4 maybe, on the bottom and the one to the right, it seems as though those require funding. We still haven't come up with how. We've come up with how we would use them, and not necessarily in a way that would say we're building new homes. These are ways that we can rehab existing homes. Is the question that I'm coming up with, is the goal to create new housing, or is the goal to refurbish existing housing, or is it a combination? Do you still consider that working toward affordable housing?
Yes, I
Okay.
believe in a combination.
Okay.
And I'm doing that stem wall right now with the modifications to my home.
Okay.
So I understood it exactly.
And there's also the focus the commission will have to make in respect to different levels of income and workforce versus other. That's all part of the focus, but again, it's a more narrow subject and will require a lot more attention and time than we have this evening, which is why we're not going further into it tonight.
All right, we've got to go. We have had some very important information provided and presented. And so at some point, we just need these things brought before us so we can decide as a commission to vote yes or no. And that's really, where I am.
May I interject one more thing, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
The partnership that I have with Habitat for Humanity is one of those where we're trying to keep the existing affordable homes by bringing them up to par. So
Yes.
that's why I believe in both, not only building new homes, but folks who have homes like my house was built in 1955, you know, trying to maintain those homes as well.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
important.
that is important.
Very
Yes.
And I
important.
just want to say one thing. So years ago, we did this and did some research on it, and there are other ways to help people save money, if that's the goal. Even if you offset daycare services, if you had a stipend for that, you could take whatever money you're requiring on one hand, put it toward that, and it adds up extra funding that you can put toward housing. It doesn't just have to be focused on housing. It can be other areas that saves money.
I'm glad you said that about daycares. I know you all want to eat, so we got to make it real quick because we have preschool children waiting to give us a presentation. And it's soon, you know, past their bedtime.
Thank you, staff. Excellent presentation.
Yes.